Hello, and welcome to Black Screen Stories and Parables by Queen's Intuition. Tonight we have part two. Who moved my cheese? An amazing way to deal with change in your life, in your work, and your life balance by Dr. Spencer Johnson, forwarded by Kenneth Blanchard, PhD. Tonight we pick up where him and Ha have separated ways. Ha is on about his business. Sniff and Scurry have already found that new, and they're enjoying themselves getting fat again. All right. Mold may have been even beginning growing on that old cheese. Ha was thinking to himself. He might not even noticed it. Would he even be willing to admit it? He was so comfortable. He probably didn't even understand what was going on. Ha realized that change probably would not have taken him by surprise if he was paying attention to what was happening all along. He should have anticipated change. Maybe that's what Sniff and Scurry had been doing all the day. They stopped for a rest, and he wrote on the wall, and it said, "Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. As written, surrounded by cheese." Sometime later, after not finding cheese what seemed like a long time, Ha finally came across a huge cheese station. Ooh, this looked promising. He went inside. However, he was disappointed. It was empty. This empty feeling is happening to me far too often, he thought. He felt like giving up again. He was losing his strength. He knew he was lost. He was afraid he's not going to survive. He thought about turning around. He knew how to get back to Station Cheese. See, at least if he made it back, he would still be there. He knew him was not going to leave. Ha wouldn't be alone. Now he is alone and he had no cheese. So he asked himself the same question as before. What would you do if you weren't afraid? He had to admit to himself he was afraid more often than not. He had to admit to himself. Why was he afraid so much? He didn't used to be so afraid. What was he afraid of? This fear itself was weakening his condition. He knew now, simple, fearful, going on alone, he didn't know it. He was running behind because he was weighed down by his own fearful beliefs. Ha wondered if him had moved on, or if he was still paralyzed by his fears. And then Ha remembered the times when he felt best in a maze. It was when he was moving along, the exhilaration of the jog. He wrote on the wall, knowing it was much as a reminder to himself as it was to anybody. Maybe him will find it. Maybe him was following him. Hopefully, one day. He wrote, "Smell the cheese often, so you know when it's getting old." As surrounded by cheese. Ha looked down at the dark passageway, aware that the fear that lay ahead, it was empty, worse. He laughed to himself. Ha ha ha! And he realized the fears himself were making him worse. This was in his head. So he wasn't going to be afraid. He moved in a whole nother direction. He started running down a dark corridor and he began to smile. He didn't realize it yet, but what he discovered was nourishing his soul. He was letting go and trusting and believing in his future and letting go of his past. And even though he didn't know exactly what it was, to his surprise, he felt exhilarated. He started to enjoy himself more and more. Oh my gosh, why do I feel so good? I don't even have cheese. I don't even know where I'm going. Before long, he knew why he felt good, and so he stopped to write again on the wall. When you move beyond your fears, you will feel free. When you move beyond your fears, you will feel free, as surrounded by cheese. Ha realized he had been held captive by his own fear. Moving in a new direction had freed him. Now he felt the cool breeze blowing in this part of the maze, and it was refreshing. He took in some deep breaths, and he felt invigorated by the movement. Once he had gotten past his fear, he turned into a more enjoyable moments. And once he believed that he could do anything, even if he couldn't see it, oh, my God, he hadn't felt this way in a long time. He almost forgot this was joy. To make things even better, Haas started to paint a picture in his mind. He saw himself eating real cheese, sitting in the middle of a pile, his favorite cheddar to brie, all in between. He saw himself eating many cheeses like before. Munster. Oh my goodness. Ooh, the Munster. Maybe a sharp cheddar too. He enjoyed the great taste. The more clearly he saw the images of new cheese, the more real it became. And the more he could sense what was going to find, he wrote, imagining myself enjoying new cheese, even before I find it, it's going to lead me to it. Imagining myself enjoying new cheese, even before I find it, it's going to lead me to it. As surrounded by cheese. Why didn't I do this before? Ha asked himself. He raced through the maze with greater strength and agility. Before long, he spotted the cheese station and he became excited. He noticed there's pieces of cheese all over in front of this new cheese station. Ooh, this new cheese. He ain't never seen this before. Ooh, it looked great. He tried them all. They were all delicious. He ate most of the new cheese bits that were available. He put some in his pockets, and then he was going to have them later, He was going to share with him. He was going to find him, and he began to regain his strength. He was strong in the heart and cheese. He entered the cheese station with great excitement, but to his dismay, he found it was empty again. Someone had already been there. They left a few bits in the new cheese, and he realized if he had moved sooner, he would have found it sooner. There was still a great deal of new cheese here. Ha decided to go back and see if Him was ready to join him. As he retraced his steps, he stopped and wrote on the wall, the quicker you let go of your old cheese, the sooner you're going to find new cheese. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you're going to find new cheese. Ooh, new cheese. As surrounded by cheese. After a while, Ha made his way back to cheese station C. He found him. He offered him bits of new cheese, but was turned down. Him appreciated his friend's gesture and he said, I don't want that. I don't want no new cheese. It's not what I'm used to. It looked funny. It smelled different too. I want my old cheese back, and I'm not going to change until I get exactly what I want. I want that old thing back. Ha just shook his head in disappointment and reluctantly went back on his own. As he return to the feathers part, he reached in the maze and he missed his friend, but he realized what he was discovering. Even before he found and hoped that he would have a great supply of new cheese, if ever, he knew he made him happy. He wasn't just having the cheese, it was the hunt as well. He was happy when he wasn't being run by his fear, and he liked what he was doing now. Knowing this, Ha didn't feel weak as he did when he stayed at Station Cheese C. There was no cheese there. Just realizing that, he was not letting go, and he was not going to let his fear stop him, knowing that he was taking a new direction, and nourished him and gave him strength once more. Now he felt that just a question of time until he found what he needed, and in fact, he sensed he already found what he was looking for. He smiled and he took time to write on that wall. It is much safer to search the maze than to remain in a cheeseless situation. It is much safer to search in a dark maze than to remain in a cheeseless situation and surrounded by cheese. Ha realized again, as he once before, that when you're afraid, it's never as bad as you ever imagined. The fear you let build you up in your mind is worse than this situation that actually exists. He'd been so afraid, never finding the new cheese, he didn't even want to start looking. But since starting this journey, he found enough cheese in the corridors to sustain him. Now he looked forward to finding more. Just looking ahead was becoming exciting once more. His old thinking had been clouded by worries and fears. He used to think about not having enough cheese and not having it to last as long as he wanted. He used to think about what could go wrong, but not thinking about what could go right. But that had long changed since the day he left Cheese Station C. He used to believe cheese would never be moved. Cheese wasn't right. Change wasn't right. Now he realized the natural state of change is to continually occur. Whether you expect it to or not, it can happen at any time. Change could surprise you, only if you didn't expect it and you weren't looking for it. When he realized he had changed his beliefs, he stopped to write on the wall. Old beliefs will not lead you to new cheese. Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. As surrounded by cheese. Hall hadn't found new cheese yet, but as he ran through the maze, he thought about what he had already learned. Hall now realized that new beliefs were encouraging his new behaviors. He was behaving differently than when he kept returning to the same cheese at the station. He knew when you changed what you would believe, you changed what you would do. He can now believe change will harm you if you resist it. Or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you if you embrace it. Change is something we should embrace. It all depends on what you choose to believe on. So he wrote on that wall. When you see you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change your course. When you see within yourself that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change yourself. As surrounded by cheese. Han knew he would be better shape now if he embraced change much sooner. He left Change Station C, Cheese Station. He would feel stronger in body and spirit. He could be better coped to deal with challenge. He was off to finding new cheese. In fact, he probably would have found it now if he expected change, and he adapted to change quicker. Rather than wasting time in denying change, he had already taken place. He gathered his will. He decided to keep proceeding to newer and newer parts of the maze. He kept finding little bits of cheese here and there. He began to retain his strength and his confidence, and he thought back to where he had come from. Ha was so glad he had written on the wall in so many different places. He trusted it would serve as a marked trail for him to follow in the maze one day, if he ever chose to leave Cheese Station C. He just hoped he was headed in the right direction again. He thought about the possibilities that him could read the handwriting on the wall, finding his way. So he stopped and he wrote on the wall again. He wrote what he'd been thinking for some time. Noticing the small changes early helps you adapt to the biggest changes that are to come. Noticing the small changes early help you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come. By now, Ha let go of the past and is adapting to his future. He continued on through the maze with greater strength and speed, and before long, it happened. When it seemed like it had been forever, his journey, at least this part of his journey, it was quickly ended and quickly happy abundance. Ha found new cheese at Station Inn. He went inside. It was everywhere. Piled high, the greatest supply of cheese he had ever seen. He didn't recognize all that he saw. There was cheese. Oh my God. Cheese covered in gold. Cheese was everywhere. Then he saw Sniff and Scurry. Snip said, "Hey, Ha." Scurry waved his paw at him. They were fat little bellies, just wobbling everywhere. They had obviously clearly been here for some time. Ha quickly said hellos and soon took bites of every single piece that was his favorite, non-favorite, and yet to come, and of course the gold one. Oh my God, he jumped into this new cheese. Oh my goodness, he ate and he ate and he ate. He even took a piece of cheese and made a toast. Hooray for change. As Ha enjoyed the new cheese, he reflected on what he had learned. He realized that he had been afraid to change. He'd been holding on to the illusion of the old cheese that was no longer even there. What was it that made him change? Why was he trapped in fear of starving to death so long? Ha thought. Crazy. Then he laughed. That as he started to change, as soon as he started to change, he learned to laugh at himself. And what he had been doing was all wrong. He realized the fastest way to change is to laugh at your own folly, let go, and quickly keep moving. He knew he had learned something useful about moving on from his mice buddies, Sniff and Scurry. They kept life simple. They didn't even overanalyze it. They didn't complicate it. They just moved. The situation changed. The cheese had moved, but they had moved with the cheese. He had to remember that. When change comes, move. Ha used his wonderful brain to do what little people do better than mice. He reflected on his mistakes he made in the past and used them to plan for his future. He knew he could learn a lot about change. He knew to be aware, to need to keep things simple, be flexible, move quickly. You did not need to overcomplicate matters or confuse yourself in fearful beliefs. You could notice the little changes begin, so you better prepared for the big changes that are soon to come. He knew he needed to adapt faster. If you do not adapt in time, you might as well not adapt at all. He had to admit the biggest inhibitor in change lies within yourself, and that nothing gets better until you yourself change. Perhaps most importantly of all, he realized there's always a new cheese out there, whether you recognize it or not, and at this time or not, you will be rewarded by the choices that you make. You need to let go of the past. Always look towards the future. The adventure of it is always there. He knew some fear should be respected, but not the fear that kept you paralyzed. But he realized those fears are irrational, and they'll keep you from changing, and change is needed. He didn't like at the time that he knew that change had turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It led him to find an even better cheese. He even found a better part of himself. Hall recalled what he had learned. He thought about his friend Him. He wondered if Him had read any of the sayings he had written on the wall on Station C, or even throughout the maze. Had Him ever decided to let go and just move on? Had he ever entered the maze and discovered what he would make his life even better? He thought about going back again to change Station C to see if he could see if Him had... As soon as Ha could find his way back there. If he found Him, he thought, would he be able to show him how to get out of his predicament? But Ha realized he had already tried this. He tried several times to get his friend to change. Him would have to find his own way. He needs to go beyond his comfort zone. He needs to go past his fears. No one else could change this for him or talk him into it. He's someone, how? It's him. He had to take advantage of changing himself. Ha had to find his way on his own. Him had to find his way on his own. This is what they have to do. Ha knew if he left a trail for him, he could find his way. He did his best. He just had to read the handwriting on the wall. He went over and wrote a summary of what he learned on the largest wall possible at Cheese Station Inn. He drew a large piece of cheese around his sights. He titled it, The Handwriting on the Wall. Change happens, they keep moving that cheese. Anticipate change. Get ready for cheese to move. Monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old and things are changing. Adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy the new cheese. Change. Move with your cheese. Enjoy change. Savor the adventure. Enjoy the taste of new cheese. Be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again. They keep moving the cheese. Ha realized how far he had come since he had been with him in Cheese Station C, but he knew it would be easy for him to slip back if he got too comfortable. Each day he expected his cheese, what was the condition of the cheese, what was going on in his surrounding. He even checked on Sniff and Scurry. He was going to do whatever he could to avoid being surprised by unexpected change. And while Haw still had a great supply of cheese, he often went out into the maze, explored new areas, stayed in touch with what was happening around him. He knew he'd be safer aware of the real choices. He would not isolate himself in his comfort zone again. Then Haw, what he thought was the sound of movement in the maze. The noises grew louder and louder, and he realized someone was coming. Was it him? Was him coming around the corner? He said a little prayer and he hoped. As many times before, maybe at last was his friend finally able to move with the cheese and enjoy it? A discussion later on that same day. When Michael finished telling the story, he looked around the room and he saw his classmates were smiling at him. Several thanked him and said they got a good deal out of that story. Nathan asked the group, "What would you think of getting together later and maybe discussing it?" Most of them said they would like to talk about it, so they arranged to meet later on that day for a drink, sometime before dinner. That evening they gathered at the hotel lounge and began to kid each other about finding their own cheese and seeing themselves in the maze. Who were they? Angela asked the group good-naturedly, "So, who were you? Sniff, Scurry, him, or Haw?" Carlos answered, "Well, I was thinking about that this afternoon. I clearly remember a time I had my sporting goods business, and when I encountered rougher encounters with change. I wasn't Sniff. I didn't sniff out in the situation. I didn't see change early, and I certainly wasn't Scurry. I didn't go with action immediately at all. I think I'm more like a him. I wanted to stay in familiar territory. The truth is, I didn't want to deal with change. I didn't even want to see it." Michael, who felt no time had passed since Carlos and his close friends in school. "What are you talking about here, buddy?" Carlos said, "Unexpected change of jobs." Michael laughed. "You were fired? Well, let's just say, I ain't want to go out looking for new cheese. I thought I had a good reason why change shouldn't happen to me, so I was pretty upset at the time." Some of our former classmates who had been quiet in the beginning felt more comfortable now and spoke up, including Frank, who had gone into the military. He reminds me of a friend of mine. His department was closing down. He didn't want to see it. He kept relocating his people. They all tried and talked to him, and many other opportunities existed in the company. He should remain flexible. He refused to take any of those. He was the only one that was left in the department. So when it closed, he had to move. He's still having a hard time adjusting to change, and he just does not want to believe that it happened to him. Jessica said, "I didn't think of it happening to me either, but my cheese has been moved more than once." Oh man, everybody laughed except for Nathan. Maybe that's the whole point. Change is happening to us all the time. It happens to all of us. I wish my family heard this cheese story before. Unfortunately, we didn't want to see the changes that were coming to our business, and now it's too late. We have to close a lot of our stores. That surprised everybody in the group. They thought Nathan was lucky. His business was secure. He could depend on it for generations to come. What happened? Jessica wanted to know. Well, our chain of small stores, they just became in fashion. Mega stores came in and they got huge inventory. They got low prices. We weren't ready to compete with that. I see now that instead of being Sniff and Scurry, we're just like him. We stayed where we were. We didn't change. We tried to ignore what was happening. And now we're all in trouble. Oh, we could have taken that lesson or two from Haw. Laura said, as a successful businesswoman who had been listening, I thought about this story this afternoon too. I wonder how I could be more like Haw and see what I'm doing wrong. Laugh at myself, change and do better. She said, I'm curious. How many times I refused to change because I was afraid? Nobody responded. Raise your hand. Did you not move because you were afraid? Finally, somebody else raised their hand. Honesty. Maybe you'll like this next question a little bit better. How many people think that because you're afraid to change, you'll never find your new cheese? Everyone raised their hand and started laughing. What does that tell us? Nathan answered, denial. Sometimes we're not even aware that we're afraid. I know I wasn't. When I first heard this story, I loved the question. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Jessica added. Well, what I got from this story is that change is going to happen whether I'm afraid or not, and whether I like it or not. I remember years ago, our company was selling sets of encyclopedia books. And one person tried to tell us to put our whole encyclopedia on a single computer disk and sell it for a fraction of the cost. It would cost us so much less to manufacture, and so many people could afford it, but we resisted. Why did you resist? Because encyclopedias were the backbone of our business. It was our large sales force who called on people door to door, keeping our sales force dependent on big commissions they earned from high price of our product. We had been successful for so long, what would we let that go for? And we didn't know what those discs were. Your cheese, Nathan said. Yes, and we wanted to hang on to it. When I think about what happened to us, I think it's not just they moved the cheese, but the cheese is life in its own. It runs itself eventually in its own way. Things have changed so much. Anyway, we didn't change, but our competitor did, and our sales plummeted. And now we have the internet. We're going through a difficult time. People rarely read books anymore. Now, another big technology is coming, and this industry seems to want to deal with it. It doesn't look good. We could all lose our jobs soon. It's May's time, Carlos shouted. Everyone laughed, including Jessica. Carlos turned to Jessica and said, it's a good idea that you can laugh at yourself today. Frank offered, that's what I got from this story. I tend to make myself way too seriously. I noticed how Ha changed, and he finally began to laugh at himself and what he was doing. No wonder he was called Ha. Angela asked, do you think him ever changed? Do you think he ever found that new cheese? Elaine said, let's be hopeful. I think he did. Corey said, I don't think so. Some people never change, and they will pay the price for it. I see people like him in my medical practice. They feel entitled to their cheese. They feel like victims. It's like they blame everybody. There's no accountability. They get sicker and sicker, and they just refuse to let go. Then Nathan said quietly, as though he was talking to himself, I guess the question is, what do we need to do? What do we need to let go of? How can we move on? No one said anything for a while. I must admit, I saw what was happening in parts of the country, but I hope it wouldn't affect us. I guess it's a lot better to initiate change while you can than it is to try and react and adjust to it far after. Maybe we should just move our own cheese. What? What do you mean? Frank asked. Nathan answered, I can't help but to wonder, where would we be today if we sold real estate under all our own stores and built a great modern store to compete with the best of them? Maybe that's what Ha meant when he wrote on the wall, savor the adventure and move with the cheese. Frank said, I think some things shouldn't change. For example, I want to hold on to basic values, but realize now It would be better off if I moved the cheese a lot sooner in my own life. Well, Michael, it's a nice little story, class skeptic Richard said. But how are you actually going to put this to use in your company? The group didn't know it yet. Richard was experiencing the same changes himself. He recently had separated from his wife. He's trying to balance his career and raising his teenagers by himself. Michael replied, I thought my job was just to manage daily problems as they came up, and when I should have been looking ahead and paying attention to what was going on, to be more proactive. And boy, I managed those problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It wasn't a lot of fun to be around. I was in a rat race. I didn't want to get out. It was what I knew. However, after I first heard this story of Who Moved My Cheese, I saw how I changed, Michael continued. I realized that my job was to paint a picture of new cheese, and to do that so clearly and realistically, I and other people had to work with what I could, enjoy changing and succeeding together. That's interesting, Angela said, because to me the most powerful part of the story is when Haw ran past his fear. He painted a new picture in his very mind of finding new cheese. Running through the maze became less and less fearful and more enjoyable. And he eventually got better to deal. He got new cheese, bigger and better, with a new mindset. Richard, who had been frowning during this whole discussion, said, My manager's been telling me our company needs to change. I think what she's really telling me is what I need to, but I never wanted to hear. I guess I never really knew the new cheese was out there, and she's trying to move us on to it. I don't know what I'm going to gain from it. A slight grin crossed Richard's face, and he said, I must admit, I guess I like the idea of seeing new cheese. Imagining yourself enjoying it, it lightens up everything a little bit, It lessens the fear that's been gripping me. It gets more interested in making new things happen. Maybe I could use this at home. My children seem to think that nothing in their lives should ever change either. They are angry, and they're bitter, and I don't blame them. I guess they're afraid of what the future holds as well. Maybe I haven't even painted a realistic picture of new cheese for them to even see that this is going to get better. Probably because I didn't even see it myself. People were very quiet as they thought about and reflected on their own family life. Well, Elaine said, most people are talking about jobs, but as I listened to the story, I thought about my personal life. I think about my current relationship is geez, and it has some mold in it. Corey laughed in agreement. Me too. Maybe I need to let go of this bad relationship. It's not nourishing me. It's hurting me. It's holding me down. Sometimes I get sick when I go home. I don't know why. It's harder and harder to wake up. We don't even talk anymore. Angela countered, perhaps cheese is just your old behaviors. What we really need to do is let go of old behaviors that keeps causing our bad relationship, and then move into a better way of thinking and acting to have a better relationship. Ooh, ouch, Corey said. Ooh, that hit home. Good point. New cheese is a new relationship. Could be with the same person, or maybe we need a different person. Richard said, I'm beginning to think there's more to this than I thought. I like the idea of letting go of old behavior instead of letting go of the relationship. Repeating the same behavior with the same relationship is like digging that hole in the first wall. Instead of changing jobs, maybe the one that I have helping my company change, maybe I should just do that. I need to do a better job than what I did before. Then Becky, who lived in another city but had returned for the reunion, said, as I listened to this story and everyone's comments here, I had to laugh at myself. I've been like him for so long, hemming and hawing, afraid of change. I didn't realize how many other people were doing this the same. I'm afraid I passed on it to my children. I didn't even know I was doing this. As I think about it, I realize change really can lead you to new and better change and places. Although you're afraid, you don't need to be. I remember a time when our son was in sophomore year at high school. My husband's job required us to move from Illinois to Vermont on short notice. Our sons were so upset they had to leave their friends. He was the star swimmer at a high school in Vermont. They didn't even have no swim team. He was angry and hurt for us making a move. As it turned out, he fell in love with the Vermont mountains. He took up skiing. He skied on a college team. And now our lives are happily ever in Colorado. If we had enjoyed the cheese story together over a cup of hot chocolate, we could have saved our family a lot of stress. Jessica said, I'm going home to tell my family this story. I'm going to tell my children what they think of Sniff and Scurry, Hem and Haw, and how they feel. Can they embrace change? That's a really good idea, Richard said. Frank then commented, I think I'm going to do more like Haw and move my cheese and enjoy it. I'm going to go pass this story along to my friends and family. Some of them are worried about living in the military. Some of them are worried because they lost their jobs. Some of them are worried because their family life is deteriorating. I'm going to explain to them what change can mean to them. It can lead them to some interesting discussions, but better outs. It can lead them to better lives. Michael said, well, that's how we improved our business. We had several discussions about what we got from the cheese story and how we can apply it to our own situation. It was great because it had a language that was more fun for us. It was more effective, especially when it spread deeper throughout the company during brainstorming. How so? Nathan said. Well, the further we went into our organization, the more people found how felt less power. Understandably so, we got their buy-in when we asked them to share how they felt. In short, change imposed the change that we needed to impose. Oh, I only wish I heard this cheese story sooner, Michael added. By the time we got around to adjusting the changes, our business had already fallen off so badly, we were starting to let people go, including some good friends who have been lifelong lifers with the company. It was hard on all of us. However, practically everyone, those who left and those who stayed, the true story helped them see things in a different way and cope better and do better. Those who had to go out and look for new jobs said it was hard at first, but they recalled the story had helped them never give up. What helped them the most? Well, after they got past their fear, they told me the best thing was realizing that new cheese was out there and waiting for them to be found. They said holding on to the picture of new cheese in their minds made them feel better. So they did better job interviews, and several got better even jobs. Laura said, what about the people who remained at the company? Well, instead of complaining about the changes were happening, they adapted quickly. They moved our cheese with us. It helped reduce a lot of stress and saved us an abundance of time. Before long, the people who have been resisting saw the advantages of change, and they even helped bring in the new change. Why do you think that happened? I think a lot of it had to do with peer pressure, that they could exist in this company and buy-in. What happens in most organizations you've been in when change is announced by top management? Do most people say that change is a great idea, or they say it's a bad idea? Bad idea. That's right. And why? Because people want things to stay the same. They've adapted to that. They think change will be bad for them. When one smart person says that change is a bad idea, they all agree. Yes. And they may not feel that way at all, but they agree in order to look smart as well. That's what peer pressure is. The fight of change is in any organization. When we're all adapting and agreeing to the same thing, the peer pressure is to change. Becky added, in families, the same thing can happen between parents and children. She asked, how are things different for people after they heard the cheese story? People just changed. They changed quicker. No one wanted to be a him, that's for daggone sure. Everyone laughed, including Nathan, who said, that is a very good point. No one in my family would want to look like him. No one in my company would want to look like him. I don't want to look like him. Why didn't you tell us this story the last reunion? This could really work. I expect great things. I'm going to move with change. Michael then offered one last thought. When we saw how well it worked for us, we passed this story along to any and everybody we came with, contact with. It might be their new cheese after all. Oh man, you're absolutely right. We're off to find our new cheese station. We're off to find new cheese. The end. Guys, share this story. Change comes. We've had so many tragedies lately and so many more. From everything changing from the weather to the climate to inflation to people, jobs. Change is all around us. Go find your cheese. Talk to you later. The end.